And we have, let's see, we've got a file to download today. So today we're working with text files. Let's go ahead and get these files downloaded. You'll want the workbook to be in the same folder as these other files. So wherever you put these files, put them all together. And our task today is actually to look at the data in one of these files. Let me just go ahead and open one of these up. Let's see, downloads. Oh, it's just a text file. Let's just open it with Notepad. All right, this is the data that we're going to work with today. So I don't know, take a look at this file and say somehow this file landed on your desk and you're supposed to make some sense of it. What can you tell me about this file? While you're thinking about that, back when I first started this class, we used to, instead of having a final exam, we had a final project. We taught the class in this much smaller groups, and so we were able to, evaluate a bunch of different final projects. We can't do it, in the number of students we run today. So, but this is actually from one of the final projects of my students. It's like, my dad gets these files, he has to deal with them regularly, and wanted to be able to import these into Excel. Okay, you looked at that for a little while. Can you tell me anything? Tell me something about this file. It doesn't even have to be that interesting, just something about it. Go ahead. Okay, so it's got some structure to it. So it's not just, random data. There's some information here and it's organized into a table. Okay, I like it. What else? Yeah, this is not a normal export. You normally think a tab separated variable or a comma separated variable or maybe fixed width columns or something. It's none of those. Yeah, this is something fishy going on here. Anything else you could tell me about it? Maybe some of you speak a different language that you could give us some insight into this. Yeah, in the back. Okay. So this is something about Brazil. I don't know, but what's the state here? Is it this here? I won't try to say it. I'll just highlight it. Is that the state? That's the state. And then what are these? Well, probably cities in this state. Okay, so this is something dealing with some geographic thing in Brazil. Ooh, what else? Oh! Ooh. For a minute there, I thought I was going to have to dismiss class. That would have been terrible. Watch the video. Let's go home. Okay. What else? What is this data actually representing? Go ahead. It's rainfall. Yeah, this is monthly precipitation. Interesting to me that this is in English when the data that we're talking about is in Brazil. And of course, their language over there is Portuguese. And so, yeah, what this is that this is like a weekly report of rainfall in Brazil. Is it overall Brazil? I don't know. Here's one state here. And what we can see, let's see, this is like percent of normal. But let's go down to the next block here. And this is just actually the actual raw data. So on November 4th, in Bambuí, there was millimeters, precipitation in millimeters. We have just a trace here. For some reason, that looks like that's missing data, 19 millimeters, just a trace. And we can see, this is like 4 through 10 total, percent of normal, 1 through 10. So this is monthly total. This is the amount for the week and so forth. And so, yeah, who comes up with a format like this for a file? It's hideous. Where does this file come from? What were they thinking when they made this? This is really kind of interesting, the history behind this kind of file, because it's still a fairly common type of file format. Let me show you why. Kind of the best I could do. We roll the clock back to the 1970s, when we're really starting to get, like 1970s. If you're running a large company, if you don't have a computer, you're really behind the times. But how many computers do you have? How many computers did your company have in the 1970s? If it has just one. And so how do we get everyone to be able to use the information for that computer? And the answer is we print out reports regularly. So if you're the sales manager, you can expect to have a report show up on your desk every Monday morning that is the sales numbers for the last week. And it was, kind of printed on this green bar paper. How many of you ever seen this green bar paper? Like 132 columns wide, and it's kind of fan fold that runs through a printer. And there's a guy whose job was at these larger companies just going around pushing a cart of reports and dropping off the report, to everyone who needs a report. During the night, we print off all these reports and then we take them around, to everyone who needs them. That's how you got your information out of the computer. Okay. That's some interesting things. So let's suppose that you're working along, you're using your report every week, and then you realize, oh, you know what? I don't really think I need this report anymore to do my job. What are you going to do? You're going to tell them quit printing the report? No, because if you tell them to stop and then all of a sudden you realize, you know what, I probably need that again, it's going to be a nightmare to try to get that report happening again. So, we printed, crazy amounts of reports and took them around. And that's the way it was. Then we started to get, kind of fast forward to the 1980s, we start to get personal computers that are like separate from the main computer, but like we have like individual now smaller computers that are getting used kind of throughout the company. And boy, wouldn't it be great if we could get the report, instead of having to print it on paper, if we could get it in some kind of electronic format that we could just read it onto a different computer. Now, it's no small task to be able to get these two very, very different computer systems to be able to talk to each other. But if we look at what the printers were like in the 1970s, 1980s, they were really, really simple. It's like a device, plugged into a wire that's plugged into your computer. And when you say, I want to print this file, you're literally just saying, send these characters one at a time, to this other device. So you're saying, you're sending character number 65. And that's capital A. And the printer goes, I know what to do with capital A. And it strikes the paper and prints a capital A. And you print that whole line, and then you say, send character 13, which is a carriage return. It moves the carriage head back. You say character number 10, that's a line feed, and advances the platen. So all these kind of control characters to make this thing print. Well, someone had a great idea. Well, what if we made a device that instead of when it received all those characters, instead of writing it, instead of actually telling it to print ink onto paper, it just printed a character onto a file. And so it was like, we can just export this report in exactly the same format that it was meant to be printed, but it would come out as a computer disk. It would come out, as an electronic file. And so it was like that became like the way to get information out of these legacy systems that were never, ever meant to share data with another computer. After all, how many computers did you have? One. Why would you ever want to put the data in someone to put it to someone else? You only have one computer. And so still kind of having this kind of a file is still a pretty common thing to have to be able to get data. And there's no like default way in Excel just to say import this file. But fortunately, we can do this with VBA. So what we're looking at today is we're looking at saying, how can we look at this file, which is semi-structured. There's some structure to it, but it's not great structure. But we want to be able to come in here, read through this file. And what we're going to do is we're going to import just the raw data. So this has precipitation data for particular locations, for a particular date range. And we want to be able to build that into something more like a comma separated file, be able to put it into data in a worksheet. That's what we're going to do. Ready to do it? Let's do it. Okay, so we have a little bit, one more thing, administratively. Saturday, April 15th, I am inviting you to come to my home. And I'm going to be having, basically a pizza lunch for my students. We'll make pizza in the wood-fired brick oven. Have you seen the oven? I think I've shown you the oven, but it's easy to see bake or. So anyway, that's the oven. No pictures of it with full of fire, but that's this oven is at my home, and we will just make a big fire in it, and we'll cook pizza, wood-fired pizza, whatever. So come, please come. If you are married, bring your spouse. If you have kids, bring your kids. If you aren't married, but there's someone you have your eye on, bring him or her, whatever, come along. And so I'd be glad to have you. All right. We normally did this between sessions in general conference, but with snow predicted kind of up until then, and I don't really have space to move it indoors. So hopefully we'll have better weather by the 15th. Okay, so I have downloaded those files. So here is my workbook, and module 1 already has some code in it. It's review code. So let's just look over it really briefly. So I've got a procedure called process data. And what does it say? It says, listen, we're going to make a collection called files. And we'll have a variable called file. I'm not quite sure why I made that variant. Probably a good reason for it. We're using the dir statement, which is going to ask for all of the files that meet this criteria. So it's going to be in the same location as this workbook, and it's going to start with anything and then have .data after it. So the files that we downloaded are like WSI 2008, some kind of data. And so this will then, I can loop until file is blank. And as long as we have found at least one file that meets this criterion, file will have the name of the first one. And then we're going to have a loop that then continues to loop as long as there are files that meet that criterion. So we are going to add into our collection the full path and the name of that file, and then we'll get the next file that meets that criterion. And then we'll continue to loop. We are loading up our collection with the full path to the files that we found with this dir statement. That loads it up, and then here I'm just printing those file names off. So I've downloaded those 3 files, and as long as I don't have any other files that end with .data, I should be able to run this and get just the names of those files then showing up, which I do. So I get, it's in my downloads, and then that's the name of the file. Show me how comfortable you are with that code. This is not brand new. We did this once before, but just on 0 to 5, seeing 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Okay. So, and then what we'll do ultimately, instead of just printing this, we will be calling this procedure that we're going to write today in class, process 1 file, and we're giving it a path to be able to work with. So, and then we've got here just a subrunner that's going to run one of those files. So it's just going to say, take the current location, add on to it this file. So this will be the one that will kind of let us work through and work on that one file. In fact, do I still have it open? Yeah, no, I don't. I think I closed it. Shoot, I'll go ahead and open it up again. Because it would be a good idea for me to have this open so I can kind of take a look at it. Can I open recent? I can't open. Documents, downloads, star.star. Okay. Okay, so step 1, I think, is going to be for us actually to open the file that we're passing the path into. So let's go ahead and get that file open. We'll process 1 file. I'm just going to say open, and we are passing in the whole file path here as a string. So open file path for, do we want this to be for input or for output? Yeah, input. So we'll be reading data out of the file, but we're bringing it into our program. So open file path, that file, whatever we send in for input as number 1. And then I'll close number 1. Oh, okay. Now, this file is so small that I could reasonably read the whole thing into memory. But can you imagine having a text file with so much data you could not fit it into memory, even if you use all of the memory on your computer? You got like 16 gigabytes. Can you imagine a text file that you might have to work with that's larger than 16 gigabytes? Yeah, 16 gigabytes isn't that much in terms of data. It's kind of a lot to have in memory at once. So one option for me would be to load this whole thing into memory and then just kind of deal with it all in memory. But what I'm going to do is show a technique that will allow us to work with files that are much larger than we could read all into memory at once. And that is, we're going to read this 1 line at a time. And the statement to read in 1 line at a time is called line input. Line input. We'll say number 1, line input number 1. So we're reading out of this file that we made here, number 1, and we have to now give it a variable to put that line into. I'll need to declare a variable for this. So let me dim one line as a string, and I'll read it into that variable. I'll print that off, and let me go ahead and pause my code here. Okay, so now if I run my Acme sub runner, I've opened the file, I've read one line off of that file, the rest of that file sitting on the disk. So by opening it, I haven't read it into memory, I've just opened up a handle to that location on the disk, and now I'm ready to read in the first line. So if I go look, does that make sense? Yeah, that's the first line, WSI Corporation. Beautiful. I don't think there's any information I need on that line. So let's just go ahead and run that line again. So I don't jump forward a certain number of lines. I just have to read the lines. And so this is anticipating that I'm going to read the whole file, but I'm only going to deal with one line at a time. Okay, let me go ahead and stop that, run it again. And now what that should print is it should print the second line. And that's what I've got. Here's my second line. So June, great, that looks great. Now, as I'm thinking about the data that I'm going to have to process, I'm going to need this right here. And I need November of 08 because when I get down to the data I'm interested in, I get the days. And we're just assuming that this is November of 2008 that we're dealing with here. So let's go ahead and figure out how are we going to get just that part. I need to get this part and say, I got to remember that because all the rest of my data that I'm going to bring in is going to need to be November of 08. So any thoughts? I've got a string with this in it. Any thoughts about how I'm going to get to November of 08? Let me go ahead and declare a variable to hold that. I'll call it month year, M-O-Y-R. Oops. M-O-Y-R. Caps lock, M-O-Y-R, as a string. And so right at this point right here, read the month and year. How am I going to do it? Any thoughts? I've got that one line that's shown in my immediate window right now. I've got that in a variable in memory right now. Okay, so one way would be to split it on, if I split it on the space, let's think about what that would do. First of all, I have to think, so there's two things for me to think of here. The first one is exactly what I see here. How do I deal with what I see here? But the second way to think about this is, I got to think of what this is going to look like in the next file, because I don't want to just process this file. I'm going to get files like this, like every week, I'm going to get a new file. And so we'll think about it. What happens if I split this by space? If I split this by a space, I'm going to have each space in here is going to be a delimiter. And so I'm not sure that I'm going to have the same number of spaces, because June, if I have the month of May, it's going to be shorter here. I'm not quite sure exactly how that's going to work. I could probably do it. So one way would be to like use the trim function from Excel and collapse all the contiguous space into a single space. And then splitting it by spaces, I like. There may be a simpler way. So what you're saying is, let's find something here. We could look for the word to, and then somehow figure out where, because what I'm really after is that November 08. The 10 I don't need because I'm going to have individual days. So yeah, that would be a little less arbitrary. There was another thought over here somewhere. Yeah. So maybe I could just keep looking until I find a numeric value. I'm pretty sure none of my months are going to have numeric values up into here. So search along until I find a numeric value that I go, there, I'm ready to start. Or I like the idea, look for something in particular. I think maybe simpler would be looking for the hyphen, the first hyphen. I don't think I'm going to have a hyphen. It's not going to show up here in some other month. We don't have any hyphenated months, do we? Like May, July, or something. I don't think so. Yeah, so there's no hyphens in month names. So I think we'd probably be okay with that. So why don't we give that a shot? Let's look for where that is. And then we know we need the next 6 characters after that. Okay, so let me declare another variable up here. I'm going to call this position, POS, that's short for position, as an integer. And let's just search for that. So let's say position equals in string function, starting at the first character, looking at one line, and looking for a hyphen. And that will show me where that is. Let me just do this. Now, I am really expecting there to be a hyphen in there. If there's not, something has gone terribly wrong. I don't know what it is, but something has gone wrong. So I might just put an if statement here. If position is equal to 0, that means it didn't find it. Then stop. Just interrupt my code, bring me into break mode. Something is terribly wrong. I expected something like, and maybe I'll just even put this as a comment in my code. Something, P-H-I-N-G. So that if I run this on some future file and maybe the file structure has changed and the second file doesn't have that date in it, then it's like a note to myself. I was expecting to see something that looked kind of like this, and that's apparently not what I got because I didn't have a position here at all. So that's just like a note in case things change in the future, but I'm not expecting to hit that at all. So let me debug.print. Oh no, that's our position. And now let's use that to set the month year. So MOYR equals the mid of one line, starting at position and taking, let's see, 7 characters. So I'm starting at this one. I don't mind having that leading hyphen. Ultimately, I'm going to be concatenating other things onto it as well. So if my position is there, I'll start there and take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That should give me that month and year that I'm after. Debug.print month and year. Okay, so it looks like we got that pretty well. Okay. Show me how we're doing so far. 5s, 5s, 5s. So 1 with a thumb. I think that means 5, actually, not 1 really. But. All right. All right. So we've got the first thing that we're after. We've got it. Okay. Okay. Now I don't think we need anything from this part that's talking about percentage of normal, because what I'm after is I'm after the raw data. So now I have to think about how am I going to kind of scan through this data until I have found something. Where's the next piece of information that I need? I don't think I need this. Nothing here. I've already got the month and the year. I don't think I need anything else until I get to this line, because this line has the days that I'm after. By the way, this exercise that we're doing here is leading up to being able to do this same approach on web pages. So when we worked with the web query wizard, we brought the data and dropped it into a sheet. What we're going to do when we start working with like remote controlling Chrome is we're going to pull in the source HTML and we're going to work through that. That HTML file is just a text file. The structure is a little bit different because it's got tags that organize things, but it's going to be the same approach. So what we're doing here is like a step in the direction of being able to like pull data off of a web page that you have to log into to be able to access. So if you're thinking, am I ever going to need this? Maybe not just what we're doing here, but definitely these skills are going to come in handy for working with data from web servers. Okay, so how, boy, just looking at one line at a time, how could I tell when because I'm going to have to read all these other lines I don't care about, don't care, and then I want to stop when I get to this line. So is there something unique about this line that I could kind of look for while I'm just kind of reading lines and say, aha, I have found the line I'm after? What would it be? It doesn't have to be this line. It could be, I could look at maybe a line 3 lines before this one. I could go, aha, this line is now 3 lines before. So read arbitrary number of lines. And then I've got this one. It could be like, okay, now skip forward 3 and we're ready to go. Anyone, can think of an algorithm looking at this. And this is kind of what this is like, whether you're working with data or working with a web page, you're kind of looking at it, it's semi-structured. You're going to say, I got to figure out some kind of algorithm that will reliably give me to the data that I want. Oh, be brave. If I don't end up doing what you recommend, it won't be the end of the world. Yeah, go ahead. I'll give you an extra slice of pepperoni when you come. Yeah.
If you're looking at just look
Okay. So I'm looking here. Maybe it's the first words that we have are station. That looks pretty good. Except when I look up here into the percent of normal data, I've got the same thing. So I could look for the first one. Once I find it, go, okay, that's not the one, and then look for the next one. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that we're after. We can make that work. There's probably a simpler one. Other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead. I could look over here. It says total. Does it say that in our summary? Oh, it doesn't say that in our summary. So if I just look for a line that has total in it, that should be it. That should do it. Or maybe just like kind of along those same lines, it might be a little simpler. If my last 4 characters are norm, do I see that anywhere else? Now this one is percent of normal, abbreviated differently. That's just norm. So let's do that. So I like the approach. I'm going to use a different word, but let's give it a shot. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to continue to read until I find that characteristic. So let me just go ahead, read the month and year. Whoops. I wrote that after my comments. Let me put that up here. And now another comment here. Search for the date header line. So I'm just going to do a do and loop. Do a do events in there. And let me do until the right until the right 4 characters of one line is equal to, and was it all capitals? And we could probably just as easily done until the end string, looking for total is greater than 0. Now that looks great, except I better do something on the inside of that loop. And all I want to do is read in another line. So another line input statement in here. Do until until. So all we're doing inside the loop is we're reading the next line, reading the next line, reading the next line until we have one that says percent of norm. And where is my one? I'm going to move my debug print 1 line now down to that point right here. So if that worked, then this should be showing my header line when I run it. I've got my month and year I'm still printing. And yeah, that looks great. We found it. Now, what I'm after is this set of numbers. Station, call. I know the station's the first one, call is the second one. But these numbers, which are headers for this report, are actually the data that I need to be able to bring in to import. So thoughts on how to get that set of numbers? Let's go look back at the structure of the data. What do you think? Well, one approach would be to say, you know what? I know it's going to say station, so just get rid of station. I know it's going to say call, get rid of call. I know it's going to say total norm, just get rid of all of that stuff, then trim it, And that's going to get me back down to those. So that would be one approach. There's probably a more straightforward way. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, maybe we could just kind of make up some kind of loop that looks until I find a number. And once I find that first number, I know that I've gotten to the right place. That would work. I think that would work. More typing than I want to do at the moment. Plus, I want to show you something that I haven't seen before. And you've probably seen when you're doing like text to columns, how many of you have like done text to columns before? Like probably most of you. And so no, I think most often we deal with data that are like delimited. Like initially you got the two choices, delimited and fixed width. And so delimited is probably the one you use the most, but I think more of a fixed width approach would work for us here because this looks like these widths are going to be fixed. If I just kind of scan through this data, you put my insertion point, so I hit right on that 4, it's hitting that 4 each time. So these columns don't seem to be shifting around. I really got to fit a fixed width structure here. So I think I'm just going to say, probably starting somewhere in here and then take a certain number of characters. What is that, like 20 characters in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. If I did 20 and took, should we say, the next 40 or so columns, I think I would be able to bring that in. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let me declare a variable called days as, I'll make this a variant. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to initially read off that block as a string, and then I'm going to want to parse it and split it into an array. And so if I use variant, I can use just that one variable for both of those operations. I like that. So now let's just say this. Let's say days equals the mid of one line, starting at the 20th character, taking 40 characters. I'm just going to go run that line again. And let's see what days looks like. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Looks like I could probably take a couple of more characters, but I think I'm going to be okay there. Maybe what happens if I take 45? Hmm, 45 is too many because it's getting that next one. So I think I'll just take 43. I think that'll be a safe bet. Now, I've got leading spaces, I got trailing spaces, and I've got multiple spaces like in between. And this is gonna be a little bit of a problem because I'm betting that these are gonna line up, whether it's 1 digit or 2 digit in the days. And so I don't know how many spaces I'm gonna have between here. So is there a way in Excel to say, get rid of all leading spaces, trailing spaces, and collapse consecutive spaces inside that string down to 1? Has anyone dealt with that before? What is it? You're nodding your head. Yeah, like built into Excel, there's a trim function. Now, there's built into VBA, there's a trim function as well. And if I do trim, T-R-R-I-M, the trim function in VBA gets rid of leading and trailing spaces, but it doesn't touch anything on the inside. But there's a worksheet function. Worksheet function dot trim that is the trim from Excel, and that is exactly what I'm looking for. So let me just go ahead and do that. I'm just going to, after I do that, I'm going to say days equals worksheet function trim of days. Question?
Yeah, I just want to ask why we're getting rid of the station and full columns. Seems like, I guess I would have thought that station column makes sense.
Oh, yeah, the question is, how come you're not dealing with the station and call as well? And the answer is station and call, those are both like, in the data that I'm going to be building, those are going to be column headers, right? I'm going to bring in, ultimately I'm going to bring in, find the one I'm working on. I'm going to bring in a column that says station and it'll have the name of the station. I'll bring in a column that says call and it'll have the call number, whatever that is. I am not going to bring in a column I'm going to bring in a column that says date. And it's going to have that 4 along with this November of 2008. And then that will be the column called date. Yeah, so I'm not after the column headers. I'm after the data that is in this report expressed in a header. Okay, now that I've got that, I should be able to split it. So let's say days equals split. Thank you. Days split of days based on a space. All right, we go ahead and run those three. And so now I should have an array of days that has a 0th position of 4, and then 5, 6, and then the very last one, day 6, should be 10. So I've got, I now have those in an array. So that's great. So I've said I've got this data that I'm going to need, and I now know the days that are going to go together with my month and year. And I think I'm in good shape, ready to keep going. Now it looks like I need to get this state. So I think I'm going to go ahead and loop again and just look until I've got something that starts with space star star star, and then I think I'll have my state. So here's my loop that did this. I'm just going to copy this down. And I'm looking, oh, maybe that's, yeah, until this is already set up for the right. So I'm going to say where the right 3 of these is equal to star star star. And this is find state. So I should have the state when I get here. I think I'm going to run this whole thing again and then print off my one line. Actually, I'll just scroll back up there and run that line. Okay, so it looks pretty good. So I'm going to need a variable for state. Then state is a string. Looks great. And then I think I'm just going to say state equals. And then I'm going to replace, I think I'm just going to get rid of the stars. So replace, look at one line, look for an asterisk, replace it with nothing. And then I think I'll just trim it after that. State, maybe I'll just wrap trim around that rather than do it on 2 different lines. Line that I was using to print my 1 year, I'm just going to use it to print state. ONE line. Oh, I'm printing one line again here. So yeah, looks like I've got the state. Ooh, so far so good. And I think from here, I'm just going to advance 2 more rows. So that should just be doing 2 more line inputs. I'll put a comment here, advance to the data block. And I will print my one line again. A little confused as to where I am, so I'm just going to kill my code and run the whole thing again. Printing my state, and yeah, it looks like I'm on January. I'm guessing that's not how you say January. How do you say January in Portuguese? Say it again. Janeiro. Yeah, I said it almost, so I'm gonna quit right there. Anyway, here we are on this line. And okay, so now it looks like that something, this $sign and this asterisk signify something. I don't know what it is. Anyone, our local folks from Brazil, we're kind of looking at those. Are those 2 that marked with an asterisk, are they fundamentally different? Is there something like, are 2 of those airport weather stations and the other ones are city weather stations or anything like that? I don't know. So if if we knew what that symbol meant, we could import it, but I just don't know what it means. So we're going to skip it. So I'm after this, and I think that's going to be from, I'll just use mid here, and this is going to be, I think I'm going to call this the city, even though I'm not sure they're all cities. I'm going to start at the second character and take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'll start the second character and take 12 characters to get the city. So I'll declare a variable for city. Where am I? And city as a string. And now that I've got this one, city equals, I'm going to trim whatever it was, and it was the mid of one line, starting at the second character and taking 12. Should have called it online instead of one line, but I want to type apparently. And I'll bring down and get my city. Yeah, and actually, I think I don't want the label in front because that's making it so I can't really tell where how much of this is part of my variable and how much is just in there because I said to tab. So we'll run that. Yeah, that looks like I've got then just the city. Similar thing for the call number. Like another variable dim C-A-L-L-N-O. I can't use it call because call is a reserved word in VBA. This is a number, looks like. So I think I could probably use an integer for this, but I don't know of a compelling reason to use an integer for this. I mean, I'm not going to take the call number and multiply it by 5 or anything. So I would be fine using that as an, integer? Wait. Oh, no, I can't use integer. Why can't I use integer? Yeah, 32,000. I could use long for this. I'm just going to stick with string. Long would be, I wouldn't feel bad about using long. I think that'd probably be okay as well. Advance to the data block. Okay, so I've got city. I've made a variable called call number, I think. All right, just to kind of help me here, I'm going to stop my code. And I'm going to move everything else below this so I can just pop to the top of my code just by going all the way to the top. Okay, so now I can come to the top and see where my declarations are. Yeah, I've got call number as a string. Equals, I'll trim this one as well. Oops, not in the right place. There it is, city. Now call number is going to be the trim, and the same thing here. Did I already count what those were? I don't remember. So this is, so it looks like if I'm the 14th column and take 5, I'll get it, but maybe I'll start at the 13th and take 7. So that'll give me what I'm expecting to be a space on the front and on the back. Then I'm going to trim them away. That way, just in case there's a small shift or all of a sudden we have a number that's 6 digits instead of 5, I'm still going to be okay. Looks like I've got the call number out. So I think the last piece of data that I need is like these actual measurements. And folks, that is going to be exactly the same as getting the dates, right? It's the same block of data here. So I think I'm going to copy that code from up above. Let's see, I had something called days. I'm going to make another one called data. And then let me find the block that dealt with that, and I'll just repurpose it. So I've got my call number ready for my data. Okay, so now I should have an array called data. Got a 0 in the first place. Let's see. So there's the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at 4 and 6. I'd expect to see 9 and 8. So my fourth element is 9. My sixth element is 8. My fifth should be a 0. I think I've got it. I think at this point, finally, at long last, I've gotten the first data that I'm ready to write out to my sheet. I know the state, I know the city, I know the call number, I know the month, I know the day, I know the year, I know the amount. I think I'm ready to write that out. Do I have a sheet that's ready to receive that data? Sheet 1, I guess it looks perfect. That's what I'm after. What is sheet 1 called? Sheet 1 is called sheet 1. I think I'm just going to go with that. So at this point, let's see, right here, I'm now ready to write the first row. Okay, so I better keep track of which row I'm on. I think I'm going to make a variable for row. In row as a long integer. And I think the idea here is I want to be able to run multiple sheets. I want to be able to run this multiple times and have it just append data onto the bottom of my sheet 1. And so let's start off by figuring out, like maybe even the very first thing I do, let's figure out what the row should be. So row is going to equal sheet 1 dot cells rows dot count, the very last, however many rows there are at the very bottom row, column 1. From there, I'm going to say end XL up. And I want the row of that plus 1, because that will be the last row that holds data. And I want to start 1 down below that. So that will say when I first start running this, figure out which row we should be adding data to. And then from there, we'll just increment each time we write. So now I'm ready to write the first data. So sheet 1 dot cells. Row number row. Column number 1 dot value is equal to, what should we put first? Should we put the state first? Row 2 is going to be my city. Row 3 is going to be my call number. Row 4 is going to be the date. So here's the interesting thing is that now I've got state, city, call number. Those are all going to be the same for this whole row. But now the row as well as these days are held in an array. So I need to do this like 7 times, like for however big this array is. And by the way, I'm not always going to have 7 days. If I look at another one of these files, this one is the very beginning of November. I only get 3 days. And that's because these reports they never span a month. So if I've got only 3 days, in this week, 3 days are in November, it's a different page just for that one. So fortunately, what we're doing, I think is going to work just fine because we take this whole block, we trim it, and then we work with it. So, but I can't just assume that I've got 7 days. I'm going to have however many days there are in that array. So let's do this for just the first one, and then we'll make a loop to generalize it. So I'm going to want, I'm writing the date now. And so this is going to be days sub 0 concatenated with my month and year. So that should take whatever the day is, the month and the year, drop that into the next column. That's the date. And now I want the data that goes with that one. So column 5 is just going to be data sub 0. If we can get this to put the first piece of data in, then we'll write a loop around this to get the whole set. That'll be pretty easy to loop. I'm going to go ahead and stop my code and run the whole thing again. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to run this and see what happens. Didn't have an error. That's a good sign. Look at my data. Looks pretty good. I got the state, I got the city, I got the call number, I got the day, and I got the precipitation for that. Might actually want to write in here, state, city, call, date, precip. Okay, so I just need to make this loop happen multiple times for my data. So I'll take and declare another variable in x as an integer or as a byte. I only need 7 at the most. So declared a variable byte, variables x as a byte. And I just need to do this whole thing multiple times before x equals 0 to the upper boundary of either days or data. It won't matter because they're going to be the same size. And then instead of reading the 0th one, I'm going to read the xth one from the arrays. And I'll increment my row. Now I'm just going to go up and run that again. I'm going to duplicate my first one. I think that's okay. Actually, I don't think I've changed row. So row is still that first one. I think I am going to write over the top of it. So we'll run that. That should give me that block of data. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it looks like I've got the right data going in there as well. Ooh. Okay, we've got 1 row so far. Well, we've been at this an hour. We only got the first row. Good news is, once you get the first row, the rest of it's going to be pretty easy. So, let's go back and look at the data. So I now need to repeat that. Boy, how do I know? How do I know when I'm done repeating it? I mean, I'm going to do the same thing for the next row and the next row. How do I know when to stop? I wonder what's on this row right here. Looks like there's nothing. I mean, I can't highlight anything on that row. So I think this is a completely blank line. So I think I'm going to make myself another loop that just loops through that until one line is blank. Ooh. So I think once we've read through that, I'm ready to read the next line. So let me go ahead and read the next line in, line input. Now I'm going to put a do loop here. Ready to write first data, do, and loop. I'm going to tab everything on the inside here. Anytime I got a do loop, I really want to put a do events in here in case this thing gets out of control. And I'm going to do or loop until one line, until the length of one line is 0. I'm really glad I have a do events in there because I'm not really sure. That might be like one space on it or something that I'm not seeing. So if this thing goes crazy, I will be able to interrupt it. but we're getting the next line. Oh, but I've got now a new line. So I need to do a little bit more inside my do. So my do can't start here. My do it has to begin up a little bit higher. See, the city will be the same for that whole row, but the next row will have a different city. The state will be the same. I think I need to put my do all the way up here. So I'm going to read in the city, read in the state, get the data. Yeah, that's what I got to do. So let's move my do way up here. We'll do this multiple times. Right, I'm going to have a different city for each line, right? Yeah, different city, different column. My state will be the same. I don't have to redo that one. It should go forward and pull that data in. Whew, I like it. I'm going to stop my code and run again from scratch because I'm not sure why replacing that do, moving that do so far, what it's going to do. Well, I hit the stop. That's good. It didn't get out of control. Same state. It looks like, oh yeah, I've duplicated this one that I forgot how to say already. Because I had it once, and then when I started my code again, it said just append to the bottom. Then it looks pretty good. I've got that one, the next one, I've got 7 days for the next one, and so forth. Trace looks like I'm bringing the data in really well. All right. So far, so good. I think I'm going to clear this off. Now, I've got the first block. Now it seems like I'm ready just to keep scanning until I find my next % of norm. So it looks like you can just go back to wherever I was doing that and say, I'm ready to kind of do that again, put another loop another loop for that one. Oof. So where do I scan for % of norm? Here it is right here. Put another do. Oh boy, I'm having loop. This is like loop madness. I'm going to tab all of this stuff in, put a loop down here, do and loop. I started that loop right before I do this loop to do % of norm, because now that I've read that block, I want to scan forward until I find the next % of norm line. And that's going to take me to read my state again and do this whole process again. But I'm not quite sure how to get out of this thing. Oh, yeah, because what's going to happen is once I've done the last one, when I'm searching for when I'm searching for this norm here, ultimately I'm going to read past the end of the file. Once I've done the last one and I keep looking, there's not going to be another one. So here it's like this line input here that's going to take me out past the end of the file ultimately. So I think this is going to, if I run this now, it's going to give me an error here. Let's let it have the error, and then let's see how to deal with it. Wow, feels a little uncomfortable to have an endless loop because I've got a do, and I've got a loop way down here, no way out. Well, I know I'm going to get out by failing, but we'll see how to exit this one. But I'm so nervous with all those loops, I am going to save before I run again, just in case things go terribly wrong. I'm going to stop this and I'm going to run the whole thing again. Well, that stop is inside this loop. So let me move this stop down after the loop. Okay, input passed into file. I tried to read past the end of the file. That's good. Let me debug that. Yeah, and it happened where I thought as I was scanning for the next norm. Well, let's go look at our data and see how we're doing. Sao Paulo, East Coast, whoever. This looks pretty good. Colombia? Like, did Brazil go and conquer Colombia? Now, like, just a state of Colombia. Is there a state called Colombia inside of Brazil? No? Well, maybe we'll have to change the column. Book of Mormon, Jesus? That means good Jesus. What does the D mean? God, oh, good Jesus. Oh. Book of Mormon means good. Okay, hey, this looks great. Okay, so we've got the data coming in. That's fantastic. Now, the problem is that once I read, like as long as I'm reading, I'm going to get, data in here. But as soon as I read and there's no more data, it sets a flag on this file called EOF to true. So I should be able to look to see, or I should be able to see if I'm at the end of the file. So let's see, we'll do the line input here. And then right here, this has had the error because it's gone one more time to try to read after that. But I'm going to say if, and there's actually a VBA statement called EOF, end of file, and I tell it which file I'm looking at. If end of file 1 equals true, then I want to be out of all of my loops. One approach would be to say exit sub. This will just take me out of this sub. I'm done with this sub procedure. The problem with that is I'm closing this file here. So if I jump out of here, I haven't closed the file. So I'm going to do something that I'm going to show you something that I wrestle with myself on whether I should teach you this power, because this is a power that you can very easily abuse. But this is about the only time that it makes sense to do what I'm about to show you. Because Visual Basic has its roots in the basic language. And the basic language has built in as part of its world a statement called go to. You can just jump to a different location. You can like jump all over the place within the same sub procedure. At this point, now I just want to, when this happens, I want to go back up here and do something else. It's a recipe for code that is almost impossible to follow. But if you're nested several layers into loops, what happens if I say exit do? What will happen if I say exit do here? Yeah, I'm inside this do loop. If I say exit do, I'll exit this one. I want to exit this one. There's no good way to do that. There's a bad way to do it, and I'm going to show it to you. Instead of exiting the sub procedure, I'm going to say go to. End of loops. That's a label. Now, I have to go make that label. I've got to go put some line in my code that says it's a named line. And to do that, I'm going to come to the point that I want to jump to after this loop. I want to go past the end of this loop here. And I just want to come here and say end of loops. Is that what I called it? End of loops? End of loop. End of loop. Colon. This is a label that just says this is a mark in the code that I can jump to. Don't go crazy with this. Like this is the only time I ever use the go to statement, except in debugging, like on error go to something, go to 0 to turn off the error handler, is to say I'm deeply nested in loops and I want to get out of all of them. That's it. So now let me stop this. Did I erase all my? I'm going to erase all my code here. And I'm going to run this again, and hopefully it will run without error. Yeah, so now I'm past the loop. I hit my stop. I'll run that the rest of the way out. And that should give me, yep, my data is back. Be able to go down and see Happy Jesus with Happy Jesus and the rest of the data. But that's only one of my files, and I've got 3 of them. Well, good news, like that part was already built for us when we started. So I'm going to come take the call from my Acme subrunner process one file. And then instead of printing file, I'm going to process one file because this was the full path to the file. This part of the loop is getting all of my, there's 3 of them, getting all those 3 files. And it should say process that file, process the next file, process the next file. So this, let me just see how many data lines we have here now. So right now I've got 904 lines. I'm going to clear that out and now run the whole thing, process data, which is going to load up my files and then process them one at a time. We're going to type mismatch. So this must be variant, and I'm expecting a string down there. So let's just fine. Let me just convert this to a string. CSTR, convert to string. And let me get rid of my stop statement. I think that's run. Yeah, now I've got over 2,000 lines. So looks like we've successfully let's see that second file up here about 1,000. You should see some that have only 3 rows. Yeah. Let's see. December 1, 2, 3. Nope, that's the full week. Oh, I'm not sure where they are. Seems like somewhere in here we should see them. What was the date on that one? I guess we can find it by date. This was 2008. This is November 1st. So there's the 5th of November. Not quite sure how to search for November 1st here. You say, what is it? Row 206? Oh, that's right, because it didn't take them in the same order. I mean, that's right. I was thinking I was doing them in the order that I was doing before, but it's different. Right, it's the very first ones. So there they are. So my first ones have only 3 days per city. The rest of them. Oh, folks, man, we managed to do that with 2 minutes to spare. Was a lot to bite off. But that is parsing a text file, and that's what it's like. You've got a few tools that you know for manipulating strings, and you say, how am I going to apply these tools to be able to organize this semi-structured text and extract out what I'm after? Again, baby steps on the way to working with HTML files, which are just text files, a little bit different structure. All right, that's it. Thanks for coming. Have a good weekend. Class dismissed.